The desert sun hung low in the sky, painting the canyon walls in shades of amber and gold. The wind whispered through the sacred lands of the Apache tribe, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant rain. It was the kind of evening when the earth seemed to hold its breath. Waiting for something to happen, a lone figure appeared on the horizon. A cowboy rode slowly on his tired horse, his hat pulled low against the fading light. His clothes were dusty from days of travel, and his face showed the wear of a hard journey. He carried nothing but a worn saddlebag and a canteen that had seen better days. The Apache scouts spotted him first. They watched from the rocks above, their eyes sharp and their hands ready on their weapons. Strangers were not welcome here, not anymore. Too many broken promises. Too many lies from white men had taught them to trust no one who came from beyond their lands. One of the scouts ran back to the village. His feet moved swift and silent across the rocky ground. Within minutes, the entire tribe knew a cowboy was approaching their territory. The news spread like wildfire and people began to gather. The tribal council assembled quickly. The elders sat in a circle, their faces grave and weathered by time. They had seen many seasons, witnessed many conflicts. They knew what men like this cowboy often brought with them: trouble, violence, theft, and disrespect for their sacred ways. Chief Tallbear stood at the center. His presence commanded respect. His hair, now touched with silver, flowed down his shoulders. His eyes held the wisdom of his ancestors and the pain of watching his people suffer. He raised his hand and silence fell over the gathering. The cowboy continued his approach, unaware of the storm brewing ahead. His horse's hooves clicked against the stones, the sound echoing in the quiet canyon. He was hungry, exhausted, and desperately needed water. He had been riding for 3 days straight, running from something, though no one knew what. As he reached the edge of the Apache settlement, warriors surrounded him. They appeared from behind rocks and trees, their faces painted for battle. Their weapons were raised, not in immediate threat but in clear warning. The cowboy pulled his horse to a stop. He slowly raised his hands, showing he carried no weapon in them. His revolver remained in its holster, untouched. He knew better than to make any sudden moves. One wrong gesture could be his last. "I mean no harm," he called out. His voice rough from thirst. "I only need water and rest. I'll be gone by morning." The warriors did not respond. They simply gestured for him to dismount. The cowboy obeyed, his movements careful and deliberate. 2 warriors came forward and took his horse. Others searched his belongings. They found nothing unusual, just basic supplies and a few personal items. They led him toward the village center. Where the council waited, every eye in the tribe followed him. Women pulled their children closer. Old men shook their heads. Young warriors clenched their fists. The hatred was thick in the air, so thick you could almost touch it. The cowboy walked with his head held steady, though fear gnawed at his insides. He had heard stories about what happened to white men who wandered into Apache territory. Most of those stories did not end well, but he had no choice. The desert would kill him if he tried to go around. Chief Tallbear studied the stranger as he approached. This cowboy looked different from the soldiers and settlers who usually came. There was something in his eyes, something the chief could not quite name. Was it desperation, was it honesty, or was it just another trick? The council members whispered among themselves. Their faces showed anger, suspicion, and old wounds that had never truly healed. One elder spoke up, his voice sharp like a blade. "We should send him away, let the desert take him. He is not our problem." Another elder nodded in agreement. "They have taken our lands, killed our buffalo, destroyed our way of life. Why should we show mercy to one of them?" The cowboy stood in the center of the circle. Waiting, he did not speak, he did not beg. He simply waited for their judgment. His fate was in their hands now, and he knew it. The sun continued its descent, casting long shadows across the gathering. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. The moment stretched on, heavy with tension and unspoken history. What would the council decide? Would they show mercy? Or would this cowboy become just another casualty of a war that had been raging for generations? The answer hung in the balance, waiting to be revealed. The silence that followed was deafening. Chief Tallbear's eyes bore into the cowboy with an intensity that could pierce stone. The entire tribe stood motionless, waiting for their leader to speak. The cowboy felt sweat trickling down his spine despite the cooling evening air. But he refused to look away from the chief's gaze. An old woman stepped forward from the crowd, her face marked with deep lines that told stories of suffering. She pointed a gnarled finger at the cowboy and spat on the ground. My son died at the hands of men who looked just like him, she said, her voice trembling with rage and grief. They wore the same clothes, rode the same horses, spoke the same lies. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered people. More voices joined hers, each one carrying the weight of personal loss and collective pain. A young warrior shouted, "My father was killed for defending our hunting grounds. My mother starved the following winter because the soldiers burned our food stores." Another man pushed through the crowd, his chest heaving with emotion. "They gave us blankets that carried death. They poisoned our water. They slaughtered our children and called it progress." His words cut through the air like arrows, each one finding its mark in the hearts of those who remembered. The cowboy listened to every accusation, every story of betrayal and violence. He did not interrupt, he did not defend himself. He simply stood there, absorbing the hatred that flowed toward him like a river after a storm. His jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady at his sides. Chief Tallbear raised his hand again, and the voices quieted. "You hear their pain," the chief said, addressing the cowboy directly for the first time. "You hear what your people have done to mine. What reason should I give them to let you live? What words could possibly justify showing you the mercy your kind never showed us?" The cowboy took a deep breath. "I have no words that can undo what has been done," he said quietly. "I cannot speak for all white men, I can only speak for myself. I did not come here to take anything from you. I did not come to harm anyone, I am just a man trying to survive. Same as you." A warrior with a scar across his face laughed bitterly. "Survive? You speak of survival while my people are being pushed off their own lands. Our children go hungry while your people feast. Our sacred places are destroyed while your towns grow. And you ask us for mercy." The crowd erupted again, voices overlapping in a chorus of anger and anguish. Some called for the cowboy to be sent away without water. Others demanded harsher punishment. The mood was shifting from hostile to dangerous, and the cowboy could feel it. Chief Tallbear's second in command, a fierce warrior named Gray Wolf, stepped forward. "We should tie him up and leave him for the desert spirits to judge," he suggested, his voice cold and measured. "If he is truly innocent, perhaps they will spare him. If not, then justice will be served." Several warriors voiced their approval of this idea. It seemed like a compromise that would satisfy the tribe's need for justice, without directly spilling blood. The cowboy would face the desert alone, without water, without his horse. His survival would depend on forces beyond anyone's control. The chief considered this proposal carefully. His weathered face showed the burden of leadership, the terrible weight of making decisions that affected so many lives. He looked at the cowboy again, searching for something, trying to read the truth in this stranger's eyes. "You say you mean no harm," the chief finally spoke. "But words are wind, they mean nothing. Your people have given us many words, treaties written on paper, promises spoken with smiles, all of them broken, all of them lies. Why should your words be any different?" The cowboy nodded slowly. "You are right not to trust words," he admitted. "I have no treaties to offer, no promises to make. All I have is this moment, and the truth that I am tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of seeing good people suffer for the sins of others." An elderly council member with white braids spoke up, his voice raspy with age. "I have lived through 7 decades of broken promises," he said. "I watched my grandfather's generation welcome the first white settlers with open arms. They shared their food, taught them how to survive in this harsh land. And how were they repaid? With bullets and disease. With theft and lies. The crowd grew louder, their anger building like a summer storm gathering strength. Children who had been watching from behind their mothers began to cry. Sensing the tension in the air, dogs barked nervously, and horses stamped their hooves in the nearby corral. The cowboy stood alone in the center of the gathering, surrounded by justified rage and historical wounds that would never fully heal. He knew his life balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one perceived threat, and these people would have every right to end him. But something unexpected was about to happen, something that would change everything. Chief Tallbear turned away from the cowboy and faced his council. The elders formed a tight circle, their voices low and urgent as they debated the stranger's fate. The cowboy could see their hands moving in animated gestures, their faces stern and unforgiving. Minutes passed like hours as the tribe waited for a decision. The youngest council member, a warrior named Running Deer, spoke with fire in his voice. "We have shown mercy before, and what did it bring us? Empty bellies and broken spirits. Every time we trust, we lose something precious. Our land, our people, our way of life, I say we make an example of this man. An older woman on the council, known as Wise Moon, shook her head slowly. Revenge does not fill empty stomachs, she said. It does not bring back the dead. It does not heal wounds. But I also do not see why we should risk our safety for a stranger who brings nothing but potential danger. Grey Wolf stepped into the council circle, his presence commanding attention. Our ancestors watch us from the spirit world, he said, his voice carrying across the gathering. They judge us not by our mercy but by our strength. If we show weakness to our enemies, more will come. They will see us as easy targets, as people who can be manipulated. The cowboy watched the debate unfold, understanding that each word spoken carried decades of pain and survival instinct. These were not cruel people, they were wounded people. People who had learned through bitter experience that trust could be fatal. A young mother holding a baby spoke from the crowd. My husband was killed by cowboys 3 winters ago, she said, her voice breaking. They shot him for trying to protect our horses. They laughed as he died. I was left alone with 2 children and another in my belly. This man wears the same boots, the same hat. How can I look at him and not see the men who destroyed my life? The baby in her arms began to cry, and the sound cut through the tension like a knife. Other women moved to comfort her, their own eyes wet with tears. The collective trauma of the tribe was not an abstract thing. It was real, present, living in every person gathered there. Chief Tallbear closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his decision seemed to have been made. He walked back to where the cowboy stood and looked at him with eyes that had seen too much suffering. We have heard many voices today, the chief began, his words measured and deliberate. We have heard the pain of mothers who lost sons, of children who lost fathers, of a people who lost everything. You stand here as a symbol of that loss, whether you personally caused it or not. The cowboy's throat tightened, but he remained silent, listening. Our laws are not like your laws, the chief continued. We do not write them on paper, we carry them in our hearts. Passed down from generation to generation, one of our oldest laws says that the earth provides for all living things, that water belongs to no one and everyone. But another law says we must protect our people above all else. Grey Wolf moved to stand beside the chief, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. The message was clear. If the verdict went against the cowboy, it would be carried out swiftly. You ask for water and rest, Chief Tallbear said. Simple things, things we would give to any creature dying of thirst. But you are not just any creature. You represent those who have taken far more than water from us. You represent an invasion that continues to this day. How can we help you when helping you might mean our own destruction? The cowboy finally spoke, his voice steady despite his fear. I understand your anger, he said. If I were in your place, I would feel the same. I would want to turn away every person who looked like the enemy. But I am not your enemy. I have never raised a weapon against your people. I have never stolen from you. I am just a man who made some bad choices and is paying the price. Bad choices, an elder repeated mockingly. Is that what you call the destruction of entire nations, bad choices? Our children are forced into schools that beat our language out of them. Our sacred sites are defiled, our buffalo are slaughtered until the plains run red with blood. And you speak of bad choices. The council members nodded in agreement. The evidence of crimes committed against them was overwhelming, undeniable, carved into their very existence. Chief Tallbear raised his hand for silence once more. I have made my decision, he announced, and the entire gathering held its breath. This man will not receive water. He will not receive rest. He will not receive mercy. The cowboy's heart sank. He had expected this, but hearing the words still felt like a physical blow. However, the chief continued, and something shifted in his tone. Before we send him to his fate, there is one among us who has not yet spoken, one whose voice carries weight in this council, one who has earned the right to be heard. Everyone turned to look toward the chief's dwelling, wondering who would speak now, and what they would say. Part 4. A Voice from the Shadows. A hush fell over the entire gathering as all eyes turned toward the chief's dwelling. The entrance flap moved slightly in the breeze, but no one emerged. The silence stretched on, thick with anticipation and curiosity. Even the children stopped their restless movements, sensing something significant was about to unfold. Chief Tallbear stood with his arms crossed. Waiting patiently, his expression remained unreadable, Giving no hint about who was coming or what role they would play in this judgment, the council members exchanged glances, some nodding knowingly, others looking genuinely surprised. Grey Wolf's jaw tightened. He knew exactly who the chief was summoning, and it was clear from his body language that he was not pleased. He stepped forward as if to protest, but a sharp look from Chief Tallbear stopped him in his tracks. The warrior stepped back, but his displeasure was evident to everyone watching. Finally, a figure appeared in the doorway of the dwelling. At first, she was just a silhouette against the dim light inside. Then she stepped fully into the fading sunlight, and gasps rippled through the crowd. She was the chief's daughter, Ayasha. Her name meant little one in their language. But there was nothing small about her presence. She moved with quiet dignity, her buckskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork that caught the last rays of sunlight. Her long black hair was braided with leather strips and feathers, traditional symbols of wisdom and spiritual connection, but it was her face that drew the cowboy's attention. One side bore terrible scars, burn marks that had healed but left permanent reminders of some past trauma. Her right eye was partially closed, the skin around it puckered and discolored. Despite these marks, she carried herself with such grace that the scars seemed almost irrelevant, overshadowed by an inner strength that radiated from her. She walked slowly through the parted crowd, people stepping aside to let her pass. Some reached out to touch her arm gently as she went by, gestures of respect and affection. Others bowed their heads, acknowledging her status not just as the chief's daughter, but as someone who had earned her own place of honor in the tribe. The cowboy watched her approach, confused about why she was here and what role she would play in deciding his fate. He noticed that while some people looked at her with deep respect, others, particularly some of the younger warriors, seemed uncomfortable with her presence. Ayasha stopped a few feet away from where the cowboy stood. Her eyes, one dark and clear, the other clouded and half hidden by scarred flesh, studied him with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he forced himself to meet her gaze, to show her the same respect she was showing him by being present. Chief Tallbear spoke, his voice carrying a tone of reverence. "My daughter has asked to speak," he announced. "She rarely involves herself in council matters, but when she does, we listen. She has walked through fire, both real and spiritual. She has earned wisdom that surpasses her years." An old woman in the crowd called out, "Let Ayasha speak. She sees what others cannot see. She knows what others do not know." Several voices murmured agreement, though not all of them. Grey Wolf shifted uncomfortably. He opened his mouth as if to object, then closed it again. The tension between respecting the chief's decision and his own obvious disagreement played across his features. Ayasha stood in silence for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear, carrying across the gathering with surprising strength. 3 summers ago, men came to our camp while most of our warriors were away hunting," she began. The crowd grew even quieter, many already knowing the story she was about to tell. Some of the women began to weep silently, remembering that terrible day. "They wore uniforms and badges," Ayasha continued, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the scars on her face. "They said they were looking for stolen horses. They searched our camp, destroying everything in their path. They knocked down my grandmother, laughed at our sacred objects, treated us like we were less than human." The cowboy felt his stomach turn. He had heard stories like this before, stories that made him ashamed of what some men did in the name of law and order. "When they found nothing," Ayasha said, her voice now carrying a tremor of suppressed emotion, "they grew angry. One of them grabbed me. He said I was pretty for a savage. He said he would take me with him. My mother tried to protect me. She fought like a mountain lion defending her cub." Tears began to stream down the faces of several women in the crowd. They knew what was coming next. "They shot my mother," Ayasha said flatly. "They shot her in front of me. Then they threw a torch into our dwelling. I was inside, trapped. The flames caught quickly. The smoke filled my lungs. I tried to escape, but the entrance collapsed. I could feel my skin burning, smell my own flesh cooking." The cowboy closed his eyes briefly, the horror of her story washing over him. "My father and the warriors returned just in time," she continued. "They pulled me from the flames. My mother was already gone for weeks. I lay between this world and the spirit world. The medicine woman said I survived for a reason, that the spirits had plans for me." She paused, looking directly at the cowboy now, her scarred face showing no hatred, only a deep, profound sadness. I tell you this story not to gain sympathy, she said. I tell you because I know what men like you can do. I have felt their cruelty. I bear its marks every day. The weight of Ayesha's story hung in the air like smoke from a sacred fire. No one moved, no one spoke. Every person present felt the gravity of her words, the terrible truth of what she had endured. The cowboy stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly at his sides, not from fear for his own life, but from the sheer horror of what this young woman had survived. Grey Wolf seized the moment, stepping forward with renewed conviction. You have heard Ayesha's testimony, he declared, his voice rising with passion. She has shown us the true face of these invaders, these men who come to our lands with their guns and their arrogance. This cowboy is no different. He may not have burned our homes, but he is cut from the same cloth. He benefits from the same system that nearly killed the chief's own daughter. Many in the crowd nodded vigorously, their anger rekindled by Ayesha's painful recollection. A warrior shouted, "Send him away. Let him face the same fate he and his kind have given us." Others joined in, their voices building into a chorus of demand for justice. The cowboy wanted to speak, to say something, anything that might bridge the impossible gap between his world and theirs. But what words could possibly matter after hearing such a story? How could he defend himself against crimes he did not commit, but could not deny were real? Chief Tall Bear looked at his daughter with eyes full of love and pain. "Ayesha," he said gently, "you have told your story. You have reminded us all of what we have lost, what we continue to lose. Does this man deserve mercy after what you have suffered?" The question hung in the air, everyone waiting for her answer. It seemed obvious what she would say. How could someone who had been burned, scarred, and left without a mother show mercy to someone who represented those who had hurt her? Ayesha stood perfectly still, her gaze never leaving the cowboy's face. She was looking at him with such intensity that he felt as if she could see straight through to his soul, reading every thought, every fear, every truth he carried. Finally, she took a step closer to him, close enough that he could see the detailed patterns of scarring on her skin, close enough to see the strength in her remaining good eye. She studied him for another long moment, then spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper, yet somehow carried to every person present. He is not them. 4 simple words. 4 words that seemed to suck all the air out of the gathering. 4 words that no one expected to hear, especially not from her. The crowd erupted in confusion and protest. Voices shouted over one another, some demanding to know what she meant, others insisting she must be mistaken. Grey Wolf looked as if he had been struck, his face flushing with anger and disbelief. "What are you saying?" Grey Wolf demanded. Moving toward Ayesha, "This man is a cowboy. He comes from their world. He carries their weapons, wears their clothes. How can you say he is not one of them?" Ayesha turned to face Grey Wolf, her expression calm despite the storm of emotion swirling around her. "I did not say he is not a cowboy," she replied. "I said he is not them, the men who hurt me, who killed my mother. They had darkness in their eyes, a sickness in their spirits. I learned to recognize it. I can see it in men's faces now. The hunger to dominate, to destroy, to prove their power by taking it from others." She turned back to the cowboy. "This man has fear in his eyes." "Yes, but not that darkness. He has exhaustion. Desperation, perhaps regret, but he does not have the evil I have seen before. He does not look at me as if I am less than human. He does not look at my people as obstacles to be removed." An elder woman stood up, her voice sharp with concern. "Ayesha, child, your heart is too kind. Your suffering has made you want to see good where there may be none. This man could be lying with his eyes just as others have lied with their words." "I am not a child," Ayesha responded firmly, "and my suffering did not make me weak or foolish. It made me wise. It taught me to see truth. I spent weeks hovering between life and death. I walked in the spirit world and returned. The spirits showed me things, taught me things. They gave me the gift of sight beyond sight." The medicine woman of the tribe, ancient and bent with age, shuffled forward, leaning heavily on her walking stick. "The girl speaks truth," she said, her voice crackling like dry leaves. "When she returned from the edge of death, she was changed. She sees what we cannot see. She knows what we cannot know. I have witnessed it many times." Grey Wolf shook his head stubbornly. "I do not deny that Ayesha has gifts," he argued. "But gifts can be clouded by hope, by a desire to believe that not all white men are enemies. We cannot risk the safety of our people based on intuition, no matter how special. The crowd was divided now, some siding with Grey Wolf's caution, others beginning to trust Ayasha's judgment. Arguments broke out in small groups, voices rising and falling like waves. Chief Tallbear raised his hand, demanding silence once more. When the crowd quieted, he looked at his daughter with an expression that mixed pride with uncertainty. "Ayasha," he said, "you have spoken 4 words that challenge our judgment. Now I ask you to speak more. Tell us why we should trust your sight. Tell us why this man deserves what others do not." Ayasha took a deep breath, preparing to reveal something she had kept hidden, something that would change everything the tribe thought they knew. Ayasha's hands moved to a leather pouch that hung around her neck. Hidden beneath her dress, she pulled it out slowly, the crowd watching her every movement with intense curiosity. The pouch was old, worn from being touched countless times, clearly something she kept close to her heart. "Before I speak further," Ayasha began, her voice steady despite the emotion building behind her words, "I must confess something to you all, something I have carried in silence for 3 summers, something that has weighed on my spirit like a stone." Chief Tallbear's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Even he seemed unaware of what his daughter was about to reveal. Grey Wolf crossed his arms, his skepticism evident, waiting to hear what could possibly justify her defense of the cowboy. Ayasha opened the leather pouch and carefully removed a small object. She held it up for everyone to see. It was a silver pocket watch, tarnished and dented, clearly having been through some ordeal. The chain was broken, dangling uselessly from the damaged timepiece. "The day of the fire," Ayasha continued. "After the soldiers left and before our warriors returned, I lay in the burning dwelling, choking on smoke. My skin blistering from the flames. I knew I was dying. I had accepted it. I was preparing to join my mother in the spirit world." The crowd leaned forward, hanging on every word. No one had heard this part of the story before. "But then someone came," Ayasha said, her voice growing softer. "Through the smoke and flames, I saw a figure. At first I thought it was a spirit, a guide coming to take me to the other side. But then I felt hands grabbing me, human hands, strong and real, pulling me through the collapsed entrance, dragging me away from the fire." Gasps rippled through the gathering. The medicine woman's eyes widened with recognition, as if pieces of a puzzle were suddenly falling into place. "When I woke up, I was lying on the ground far from the dwelling," Ayasha continued. "The person who saved me was gone, but I found this watch clutched in my hand. It must have fallen from his pocket when he pulled me out. I was too weak to speak, too burned to see clearly. By the time our warriors arrived moments later, my rescuer had vanished." Chief Tallbear stepped forward, his face showing shock and confusion. "Why did you never tell me this?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why did you keep this secret for so long?" Ayasha looked at her father with tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Because I was confused, ashamed, afraid," she admitted. "The men who burned our home were white men. They killed Mother. They hurt me, but another white man saved my life. How could I reconcile these truths? How could I tell you that one of them saved me when you were drowning in grief and rage?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I thought about that man every day," she said. "I wondered who he was, why he helped me, if he was real or a vision sent by the spirits. I prayed to understand. I asked the ancestors for guidance. And I kept this watch, hoping one day I would know the truth." Grey Wolf's expression had softened slightly, but his guard remained up. "A touching story," he said carefully. "But what does this have to do with the cowboy standing before us now? Are you suggesting he is this mysterious rescuer? That seems too convenient, too impossible." Ayasha turned to look at the cowboy directly. "When you first arrived," she said to him, "when I saw you from inside the dwelling, something stirred in my memory, a feeling, a sense of recognition I could not explain. That is why I asked my father to let me speak. That is why I needed to see you up close, to look into your eyes, to know for certain." The cowboy's mind was racing, trying to remember, trying to piece together fragments of a memory he had buried deep. His face had gone pale, his breathing shallow. "3 years ago," Ayasha said, now addressing the cowboy directly, "where were you? What were you doing?" The cowboy's throat felt tight. His hands began to shake more noticeably. He started, his voice cracking. "I was riding with a group of men. I thought they were lawmen. I thought we were tracking actual horse thieves. I was young, stupid, believed everything they told me." The crowd grew silent again, everyone straining to hear his words. When we reached the Apache camp, the cowboy continued, his voice heavy with shame. I realized these men were not lawmen. They were criminals wearing badges, monsters hiding behind authority. I watched them destroy property, threaten women. I saw one of them grab a young woman. He paused, his eyes meeting Ayesha's scarred face. I saw him shoot an older woman who tried to protect her. Tears began streaming down his face now. I tried to stop them, he said. I pulled my gun on my own companions. Told them to leave. They laughed at me, called me a coward, a traitor to my race. One of them knocked me unconscious with his rifle. When I came to, they were riding away. I saw smoke rising from one of the dwellings. He took a shuddering breath. I ran to it, he continued. I could hear someone inside screaming, coughing. I did not think, I just acted. I tore through the burning entrance, found a young woman barely conscious. I pulled her out, got her away from the fire. Then I heard horses approaching, warriors returning. I knew if they found me there, they would kill me. Think I was responsible. Part 7. Honor Beyond Blood. The cowboy's confession hung in the air like thunder after lightning. He stood there trembling, years of guilt and shame pouring out of him. I ran like a coward, he continued, his voice breaking. I left without knowing if she would survive. I have carried that moment with me every single day since. The faces of that woman who was shot. The girl I pulled from the flames, they haunt my dreams. I cannot escape them. He looked down at his hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. I tried to report what happened, he said. I went to the territorial marshal, told him everything. He laughed in my face, said no one would believe a word against respected citizens, said Indians died all the time and nobody cared. He told me if I kept talking, I would end up dead in a ditch somewhere. The crowd was completely still now, absorbing every word. Even Grey Wolf had fallen silent, his expression complex and unreadable. So I ran, the cowboy said. I have been running ever since, not from the law but from those men. They have been hunting me for 3 years because I witnessed their crimes. Because I turned against them, they want to silence me permanently. That is why I am here, desperate and alone. They have tracked me across 3 territories. I have nowhere left to go. Ayesha stepped closer to him, holding out the pocket watch. Is this yours? She asked quietly. The cowboy looked at the watch and recognition flooded his features. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small photograph, yellowed and creased from being carried for years. It showed a young boy standing next to an older man, both smiling. The older man held the same silver pocket watch in his hand. My father, the cowboy said, his voice barely a whisper. He gave me that watch on his deathbed, said it belonged to his father before him. Said time is the only thing we truly own and we should spend it doing right. I lost it the day I pulled you from the fire. I thought it was gone forever. I thought, he paused, emotion overwhelming him. I thought it was the price I paid for my one decent act. Ayesha handed him the watch, their fingers touching briefly. The cowboy took it with shaking hands. Holding it as if it were made of fragile glass, tears fell freely down his face now, mixing with the dust on his weathered cheeks. Chief Tallbear stepped forward, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. You saved my daughter's life, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You risked everything to save her when you could have ridden away with those evil men. You chose honor over safety, compassion over loyalty to your own kind. The chief placed his hand on the cowboy's shoulder, a gesture that sent shockwaves through the tribe. What is your name? The chief asked. Thomas, the cowboy replied. Thomas McKenna. Thomas McKenna, Chief Tallbear repeated. You gave my daughter life when death had already claimed her. You gave me back the most precious thing in my world. There is no greater debt, no greater honor. You are welcome here. Not just for water and rest, but for sanctuary, for protection. For as long as you need it, Grey Wolf stepped forward, and for a moment, tension rippled through the crowd again. But instead of protest, he extended his hand to Thomas. I have misjudged you, he said, his voice formal but sincere. I saw only what you appeared to be, not who you truly are. I apologize. Any man who would risk his life for one of our people, who would turn against his own kind to do what is right, such a man deserves our respect. Thomas shook Grey Wolf's hand, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in his circumstances. Minutes ago, he had been facing death or exile. Now he was being offered sanctuary by the very people he had expected to end his life. The old woman who had spoken so bitterly earlier came forward. Her face softened with tears. You saved our chief's daughter, she said. In doing so, you saved a piece of all our hearts. She is precious to us, beloved by the entire tribe. You gave us a gift we can never fully repay. One by one, members of the tribe began to approach Thomas, touching his arm, his shoulder, offering words of gratitude and welcome. The young mother who had lost her husband said, "You are not like the man who took my love from me, I see that now. Forgive me for judging you before knowing your truth." Ayesha watched all of this unfold, a gentle smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The medicine woman shuffled over to stand beside her. "You knew," the old woman said, "even before he confessed. You knew it was him?" "I felt it," Ayesha replied. "When he first stood in our circle, when our eyes met, I felt a connection I could not explain. The spirits whispered to me, told me to look deeper, to see beyond the surface. They showed me the truth of his heart." The medicine woman nodded knowingly. "The fire that scarred your skin also opened your inner eye," she said. "You see now what others cannot. You have become a bridge between worlds, between old wounds and new possibilities." Chief Tallbear raised his voice to address the entire gathering. "Tonight we will feast," he announced. "We will celebrate the return of a debt, the healing of old pain, the beginning of new understanding. Thomas McKenna is no longer a stranger. He is a friend. He is family." The crowd erupted in cheers and ululations, the traditional sounds of celebration. Children who had been watching from the edges ran forward, their earlier fear replaced with curiosity and excitement. Women began organizing preparations for the feast. Men started building up the central fire. Thomas stood in the center of it all, still holding his father's watch, still trying to process the miraculous turn his fate had taken. He had come to this place expecting death. Instead, he had found redemption. He had found the answer to 3 years of haunting questions, but the story was not over yet. The celebration lasted long into the night. The central fire burned bright, casting dancing shadows across the canyon walls. The smell of roasted meat and herbs filled the air, mingling with the sound of drums and traditional songs. Thomas sat among the Apache people, no longer an outsider but an honored guest, still overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. Children gathered around him, their initial fear replaced by fascination. They asked him questions about his horse, his hat, his gun. He answered them patiently, making them laugh with stories of his clumsy attempts to learn roping as a boy. The children's laughter was a sound he had not heard in years, pure and untainted by the darkness that had followed him. As the night deepened, Chief Tallbear sat beside Thomas, offering him a pipe in the traditional gesture of peace and friendship. "You carry heavy burdens," the chief observed, watching the younger man's face in the firelight. "I see it in your eyes, the weight of things you have witnessed, things you could not prevent." Thomas accepted the pipe, following the chief's example of how to smoke it properly. "I have seen terrible things," he admitted, "things that make me ashamed to be counted among white men. I have watched my own people commit acts of cruelty that haunt my soul. And I was too weak, too powerless to stop them." The chief nodded slowly. "One man cannot turn back a flood," he said, "but one man can pull another from the water. You did what you could. You saved my daughter when others would have let her burn. You spoke against evil when others remained silent. That is not weakness, Thomas McKenna. That is the rarest form of strength." Ayesha approached them, carrying a blanket woven with traditional patterns. She placed it around Thomas's shoulders. "This belonged to my mother," she said softly. "She made it with her own hands, teaching me the patterns. The meanings woven into each thread. I want you to have it, as a symbol of the life you gave back to me." Thomas touched the blanket reverently. "I cannot accept something so precious," he protested. "This should stay with your family." "With your people. You are family now," Ayesha replied, her scarred face serene in the firelight. "When you pulled me from those flames, you became bound to me, to us, in our tradition. Such a debt creates a bond stronger than blood. You are my brother now, whether you accept it or not." Grey Wolf joined them, accompanied by several other warriors. "We have been discussing your situation," he said, his tone serious but not hostile. "These men who hunt you, they will not stop. They will track you even here if given enough time. We cannot allow them to bring violence to our home." Thomas's heart sank. Was this where the sanctuary ended? Was he to be sent away after all? To protect the tribe from the danger that followed him, but Grey Wolf continued. "Therefore, we have decided to help you end this threat tomorrow. We will scout the surrounding territories. Find where these men are, we will deal with them in our way. You will finally be free to live without looking over your shoulder. I cannot ask you to fight my battles, Thomas said, shaking his head. You have already given me more than I deserve. I will not bring war to your people. Chief Tallbear placed a hand on Thomas's arm. You are not asking, he said firmly. We are offering. These men are not just your enemies now, they are ours. Anyone who would hunt a friend of our tribe, anyone who would bring violence to our lands, they have made themselves our concern. Over the following days, Thomas learned the ways of the Apache people. He helped with daily tasks, learning to track game using methods he had never imagined, understanding the land in ways his own culture had never taught him. The warriors trained him in their fighting techniques, showing him how to move silently, how to read signs in nature that spoke volumes to those who knew how to listen. Ayasha spent time with him, teaching him words in her language, sharing stories of her people's history, their struggles, their triumphs. You see us now, she said one afternoon as they sat overlooking the canyon, not as savages, not as obstacles, but as people. Real people with families, dreams, pain, and joy. If only more of your kind could see what you see now. I was blind before, Thomas admitted. I believed what I was told, what I was taught, that your people were somehow less, somehow deserving of what was done to them. I am ashamed of that ignorance. I can never undo the harm my people have caused, but I can try to be different, to do better. 3 weeks passed, and the Apache scouts finally located the men who had been hunting Thomas. They were camped 2 days' ride away, asking questions in settlements, showing Thomas's description, getting closer. The warriors prepared for confrontation, their strategy careful and precise, but before they could leave, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Riders were approaching, many of them. The tribe prepared for the worst. Weapons ready, children moved to safety. But as the riders drew closer, Thomas recognized something that made his blood run cold. It was not the men hunting him, it was something far worse. It was a cavalry unit, at least 30 soldiers, riding in formation toward the Apache settlement. Leading them was a lieutenant Thomas recognized, one of the men from 3 years ago, one of the monsters who had killed Ayasha's mother. The lieutenant's name was Crenshaw, and he wore his badge like a shield against conscience. As the soldiers surrounded the Apache settlement, Crenshaw's eyes scanned the gathered people until they landed on Thomas. A cruel smile spread across his face. Well, well, Crenshaw called out, his voice dripping with false authority. Thomas McKenna, we have been looking for you for a long time, and here you are, hiding among savages just as we suspected. You are under arrest for desertion, theft, and conspiracy against the United States government. Chief Tallbear stepped forward, his presence commanding despite being surrounded by armed soldiers. This man is under our protection, he declared. He has committed no crimes, he is a guest in our home. And you will not take him. Crenshaw laughed, a sound without humor or warmth. You do not get to decide that, Chief. This is American territory now. You and your people exist here by our grace, which can be revoked at any moment. Now hand over the fugitive, or face the consequences. The tension was suffocating. Warriors gripped their weapons, soldiers tightened their holds on their rifles. One wrong move, one misunderstood gesture, and blood would flow. Everything Thomas had found here, the peace, the redemption, the family, all of it balanced on a knife's edge. Ayasha stepped forward, placing herself between the soldiers and Thomas. Her scarred face showed no fear, only fierce determination. She looked directly at Lieutenant Crenshaw, and recognition flickered in his eyes. He remembered her, remembered what he and his men had done. You, Crenshaw said, his smile fading slightly. You should be dead. Your fire did not kill me, Ayasha replied, her voice clear and strong. Just as your lies will not protect you now, this man saved my life while you and your men tried to take it. He is worth 1,000 of you, and we will not let you have him. The standoff continued. The future uncertain, balanced between violence and hope, between old hatreds and new understanding. Whatever happened next would determine not just Thomas's fate, but the fate of everyone gathered in that canyon. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, and the world held its breath, waiting.